I guess I'll go first. Nothing really to report. um, my Unix laptop is still running slow, so I'm anxious, or I'm trying to get everything moved off my Windows 10 machine so I can then make it dual bootable and run my Ubuntu and stuff off of it, because it's got 16 gig of memory, whereas the other one had only 1 gig. No, I guess it did have two.
Another thing to keep in mind if you're trying to, instead of going to the dual boot, another option is just if you have an extra solid state drive that plug into the USB, you could actually plug that in and put everything on that. And that way you could probably move that between computers then if you wanted to, but it's just the extra hassle. Now you got this thing hanging out the side. So that's not really the best solution, but depending where you want to go and how much screwing around you want to do with this stuff.
Yeah, my first try would be to actually get it dual bootable. Because I won't, in fact, I may even just get rid of the Windows 10. But I don't want to, I'm not moving everything over, and I just don't want to actually accidentally miss something and not be able to get to it.
Is that your new computer or is that an older computer you got that's got the Windows 10 on it?
The older one is the Windows 10. The new one has Windows 11 Pro. It's what came with it, so it had everything else that I wanted. So,
And then again, another option is instead of making a dual boot, just pull out the Windows hard drive and put in a new hard drive and put your Linux on that. And you can always plug your external one into one of the little adapters, and you can even boot. I think you can probably even boot Windows from that to get back to your stuff, or you can just. Now, I don't know how this works these days, but I know that Linux will talk to a Windows machine, but I think Windows will say, I don't understand Linux partitions. So that's just another one of those things. If you're running Linux already, you should be able to connect a Windows computer and look at the file system and get the files off from it or whatever. But then you could also just boot from that too, I think. On I guess you could try that first, just pull that hard drive out, put it on one of those external adapters and plug it in the USB and see if it'll boot your Windows from the USB and run normally. And then if you have another hard drive around, stick that in the computer and put your Linux on that. So yeah,
okay,
again, you got lots of options there.
got it. Thank you.
And again, keep in mind that the fact that HP likes to take up all the partitions, so it makes it harder to boot your harder to put your Linux on it. And but I think Linux is getting wise to that, and it'll somehow install it in a like a sub partition or something. There might be a way that it'll work anyway without having to go delete all the extra partitions that they may have put on there just because they could.
Right.
So don't spend weeks on it. If it won't work, that's something to consider, that they may have done that to you, because like every HP computer I've bought has worked that way. That and I spent weeks trying to figure it out every time. And they're probably, oh, I remember now. I remember the last time I did this. You have to go delete all that junk so you have a root partition to put your stuff on.
My old one is a Asus, so it's the new one that's the HP.
And I don't know if other manufacturers do that. I just know HP has bitten me several times on that. So
While we're on the subject, would you think I could? So I have a Windows 10 machine that's also got a dual boot into it, Ubuntu 20.04. I don't use it for ROS related stuff, or Noetic related stuff. So I was thinking I could upgrade it to 22.04. Would that give you pause could I move, not screw up my Windows 10 side of the machine, but upgrade my 20.04 to 22.04?
yeah, you should be able to do that, but I've run into this, and other people have said that rather than click on things saying upgrade from one version to another, you're better off just deleting and installing it new. But I don't know. You can take your chances on it. You've got a lot of extra time on your hands. You could try to just say click on it and say upgrade, and if things aren't working, then you could delete your Linux and say, actually, when you go to install Linux, it says, do you want to um, there's an option that says, do you want to overwrite what you've got? It's basically just rewrites everything, so that you can look at that a little bit before you dive into it. You think about it a little bit before you click the button and say, yeah, delete all the stuff or do whatever. But that
Yeah.
shouldn't be any reason why you can't. If you got Linux installed on there now, it thinks it's got a whole computer to itself. So if you get rid of the one Linux and put the new Linux on, or go down the path of clicking on upgrade and see what it does, you could do that too. But no, I don't see any reason why that shouldn't work.
Let me pause.
What's that?
It gives me pause
Oh,
to,
okay. I thought you were asking to pause the recording, so I wanted to make sure that
Mm.
that's what you said there. So you done, Terry?
Yes.
Well, I just had a couple of comments. I got that lawnmower that I pulled off the curb one day. That was one of those real lawnmowers, and I said maybe I need to sharpen it. So on Tuesday, I ran over to the auto parts store and got some valve grinding compound. People say that will work. So I just have to get the ambition. They say it takes 10 minutes to do this, but I'm sure it's going to take all day once I get started. You just have to take the thing and flip it upside down, take the wheels off. You have to smear this stuff on the blades, and then originally they said you get a crank and you crank the thing, and somebody else says, "Oh, just put your electric drill on it and run it for X amount of time." That sharpens the blades. So I might try that. And I went out and played with it some more. And as Al was saying, well, it may not be heavy enough to work, but I was just purposely pushing it forward without putting any downward pressure on, and it does seem to spin the blade. I think if you get into really heavy grass, it would stop. But anyway, I think that might work. So if I try sharpening it, and the other thing I noticed is it's set to like half an inch of height. So if I raise it up to something reasonable, like 2 inches, and go out and mow my yard, it would probably do a better job too. And if you do it several times, that might work. So the whole point was, if I put a hitch on and pull this behind this vehicle right here, pull that around the yard, and I thought, well, that might work. So I don't know how much effort I'll put into that. But when I was digging through the garage to get out my gas push mower, since I'm gonna have to go out and mow the yard, I remembered, oh gee, I've got an electric lawnmower here that I pulled out of somebody else's trash one day. I think it might have been a Ryobi, and it's built just like a gas mower, except it's got an electric motor on it. So it's got the electric motor sticks down with, I think, an actual lawnmower blade on that. And it has like 2 lead-acid batteries that go in the thing. I've never actually fired it up, but I see no reason why it shouldn't work. So that would be another option. So rather than trying to pull a real type mower and get it to get good traction and make it do what it's supposed to, I could just pull an electric mower around behind this vehicle here, to have that pull it around the yard. So that's my exploration on lawnmowers, and most of that's just thought experiments trying to decide what it's going to do. So as I say, I found the electric mower, and I suppose I should put some. I could go to the trouble having it so the vehicle can say turn the mower blade on and off, so just have like a wire coming out to run a relay or something. Or as with all experiments, you could go out and physically start the electric mower running, and then tell the tractor to start driving around, and just hopefully nothing will go wrong doing that. So that'd be something to consider there. And then I was playing with those telemetry radios. I was saying last time that, well, maybe if I just plug them in, they're already configured and will work. And sure enough, when I plug in my laptop, they do connect to each other. And I did some playing around. I finally loaded up Putty, which is that terminal emulator program, and fired up 2 copies of that so I could type on one and see it show up on the other. And it was the radios were set to Mavlink protocol, I think is what it is. And other people are saying you should set it a raw protocol. So I did find a page that said advanced configuration for these radios, and they've got like an AT command set, like back in the old days when everybody had 300 baud modems, those all used AT command set. Well, this is actually ATI now for some reason. I don't know why, but I was able to go in there and type a command and change it from the Mavlink to the raw mode. And at one point, I was saying, could you do this without having to load up the actual software? What's that called? Mission planner software, which will configure the radios. And it turns out, yeah, if you know these commands, you type them in, you should be able to do just about anything you want. And it's looking back through Al's notes, and he was saying, oh, he's somewhere in there, he's using these AT commands to do something. So apparently he knew you could do that. He just didn't realize that you could have done it completely without having to load that software. It looks like the software has lots of extra features that might be handy just to play with. So, and the other thing I noticed was, at one point, I was just playing with the configuration under PuTTY. It had nothing to do with the radios. And I got to the point where so terminal 1, I'd type on it, type a key at a time. And on terminal 2, the characters would show up. Then if I go to terminal 2 and type something, nothing would show up. I'd type a whole line and then hit the enter key, and then bam, it'd send a whole block over to the other side. And I'm not sure why it was doing that, because the radios are still configured the same way. And then I just played with PuTTY and set the configuration of something else, and then it started working. I got it so every time I hit a character, it'd show up on the other side, either direction.
I was going to suggest looking at the configurations in PuTTY, because I think it can go either what I call burst mode or character mode.
I don't know what that's called. I do know they have various kinds of terminal emulation, so it could be that based on what that's set at, that might be doing something funny too. And the other thing was, I finally got to the point where I fired up my my Intrip client on my laptop, so it would connect to the internet, get my correction data, and take the binary data and shove it out the serial port to one of the radios. So I had the other radio turned on, coming in another serial port, looking at that with PuTTY, and it's just binary garbage showing up on the screen. But every once in a while, they would say PuTTY in that message, and I thought, well, that doesn't seem right. So again, I don't know if it's just my PuTTY program is doing something funny to me, and I might just be confusing myself, because there was a lowercase p, lowercase u, and then a capital TTY. So that might be a Linux thing saying it's a TTY port or something. So, but again, it might just be the terminal program is doing something funny to me. I could try something like loading Minicom. I can never get Minicom to work. Then there's another one. There's a Python based one. I can't think of it. They maybe called PyCom or something like that. Or I know one time Al just wrote a program, just loaded up Python and said, just created basically a terminal program that says connect to the port and then do whatever you want with it. So that might be another way just to test it out and try that out. Also in Al's notes, he said, oh, here's a guy's website where he's talking about how to do, how to verify your serial data back and forth on something. So I can look at that too. Or the simplest way would just be connect the radio right to my GPS receiver, and then connect the other side to my Intrip client and run it. And there's a window somewhere in the GPS stuff that says, show me the incoming correction data, and it'll tell you what the message types are and whether or not the checksum is correct. So that if it's everybody's happy there, I'm right. I guess I'm ready to go. So I don't have to do any more verification than that, I don't think so. But I just haven't got around to doing that. And other than that, I guess that's what I've been doing. Pretty well sums up what I've been wasting time on.
Sounds like a lot. That radio stuff. I have a little bit of radio stuff to talk about as well.
Go for it.
Well, let's see here. I had well, let's start with. So I put a post out about some results, and effectively, you learn from bad days just like you learn from good days. I had this what I call 3-turn mission planned, and this gobbledygook around here is again obstructions in my backyard, and so it was meant to go start here, go up, make a Dubin's path, come back and do that 2 more times for a total of 3 turns. I remember, you used to say, hey, I got a clean compile. Everything's good with my program. No, it works in simulation is sort of I guess the analogy. It works fine in simulation, but in reality, what you would see in these videos is it goes up and starts to make what I believe is this turn and then sort of wanders off over in this direction. And so I began the process of debugging that, and my steering, there was just something funny going on with my steering, and I decided I better check how fast my main loop was running. So I've got, let's see, where did I put that? So in my tractor, in my tractor control, my my main loop, I've tried to keep it reasonably simple, but over time I've added more things. So this is the main loop of the tractor control. Originally, it steered the vehicle, it controlled the throttle, it got some data off the tractor, it sent an outgoing message. And over time, I've added some things here. So I decided I better calculate how fast is this loop actually running. And that led me to a place that said, well, that loop is taking a second to get through all of those processes. And through a process of elimination, I found out that the LoRa had, Jeff's probably got better language than I do about it, but I'll call it a blocking function, checking on is there an available message to process. Now remember, the whole reason I'm using LoRa is a safety feature. I want to be able to do an e-stop from my remote control and do that, relatively quickly. So my radio control is effectively sending a heartbeat 3 times a second. Well, this not only does this screw up my steering, but it also has a safety component to consider, saying if everything's taking a second to process, it might be a while before it gets around to that e-stop. So anyway, I've been on a bit of a journey with my LoRa to see how fast I can get that to respond, and I'm still not done yet, but I have switched to there's an interrupt based approach that the author of the library included in his examples. And at the moment, I've got out in the GitHub, let's see, there is an approach where it has a function that's set DIO action, and you can say on the rising signal to do something, and what I've done is say, hey, there's something to be received. And so I'm in the process of trying to get this code to work and see how fast I can get the LoRa to send and receive messages, all because I want my main loop in my tractor control to process certainly faster than 1 hertz. Ideally, I think 20 to 50 hertz would be fine. Anything over that would be a plus. Anything less than that to me is a little bit dangerous. So at the moment, that's what I'm working my way through. Any thoughts or questions on that? Because then I wanted to talk about connectors.
Is it I take it the Lauren is the bottleneck in your main loop?
At the moment, that was, when I took out the LoRa, it was processing, if I can believe the data, it was processing at like 5,000 hertz, meaning the loop was going that fast. When I put that LoRa messages back in, it goes down to 1 hertz. So yes, I believe
Okay.
the issue is the sending and receiving of the radio signals.
I have a thought on that. I was thinking in that radio code, there's something you can say, is data available? And I don't know if that says, a character or an entire packet has been received. But I was thinking if you check that, it says there's no data there, then you don't have to worry about, it's not gonna block. It just says, no, it's not ready yet. And you just go on. So I'm not sure what, how you're calling that. And it's been so long since I looked at it. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but
Yeah, there's this, I'm gonna point to it from here because I'm a little, if I go into the main code, let's see if I. This was this, without these two statements above, this was the statement that was previously used. It was a radio receive function. And I basically said if the state was false, don't process, just move on.
but
But
the state you're looking at says radio available, which has nothing to do with data. That just says whether or not the radio is working. You're probably just checking the wrong thing. So you could say if the state is data has been received, then go ahead and call the receive function. And then it's just immediately take the stuff and do something with it, I believe. Because right there, radio available. You can go look that up to see what the definition of it is, but I assume that just means that the thing is powered up and ready to be doing something, which means, anytime you look, once you initialize it, it's always available. So every time through the loop, you can say, oh, well, let's sit here and wait now for the packet to come in. So yeah, that's why it's going to block.
yeah, this was the thing that, I mean, I'm at the Radio Lib GitHub site, and that was when I saw this, I'm like, oh, and then
I think what he's saying is that the is available just means that the radio is available, not that there's data available.
Yeah,
Is
that's what
there maybe a like receive length or buffer length?
something called data available.
yeah, there might be another function in there that I haven't investigated that's completely. This was his receive example, and he's just setting the state based on receive. And then he's saying if the state doesn't have an error, then he goes on and processes. This is basically what I started with.
And the reason he wrote it that way is because he's not doing anything else at the same time. So that's one of the simplest things you can do. But just around that, you can just say is data available. If not, then don't call the receive function. So there's just one more step you can do before you get into that.
I see he's got 4 down the receive interrupt. Have you looked at that to see how that operates?
Yes, that's what I've at the moment got.
Okay, I'll rephrase it. The code you're looking at now, you were looking at, that's the receive.ino, whereas on the left side where he's got the lists of folders, that one.
Yeah, that's the one I'm testing now.
Oh, okay. You're showing the code for just the receive, not the receive interrupt.
Right. I mean, this is the receive, plain Jane receive, using
Yeah.
this radio receive and then going into doing something with it. Jeff is suggesting, and it's a legitimate suggestion. I don't know if there's another alternative to use this receive without the interrupt. That's something that I could explore if I can't get the interrupt to work. Because again, using this basic approach, although this isn't my code, I can, I can confirm this is basically what I was doing before. Would this function, that radio receive is slow, and I don't think it's sitting there waiting. So at the moment, what I've got,
I think it is sitting there waiting, because you're telling it to sit there and wait until something comes in, because you didn't check the correct status before you called the blocking function. So maybe under receive interrupt would have something, or just simply a different receive INO, receive direct. Yeah, I'd say when you get some time, go through that receive interrupt and see what they're telling you. It probably has nothing to do with interrupts. That just simply means, if we receive data, where it's going to have like a callback function or something, is probably what that means. And he probably is put the term interrupt in there, and it probably has nothing to do with interrupts, but maybe it does. I don't know.
Well, what I can show you is, I mean, again, this is his sample code, not what I've started to work on. There is this function inside of the code that says, if you have something rising, then go do this. And in this particular case, set flag basically says I've received something. And then in the main loop, he's saying, if you've received something, do something. And in this case, he's saying, read the data. Now, I've taken that and got it loaded on 2 different boards, and this loop has this built-in delay of 1 second. So where I'm literally at the moment, I mean, this is stuff that I put up there, is in the process of, I'm going to keep reducing that delay to see effectively how fast can I get these 2 boards talking to each other. So that, and then if I figure out that, then I'll try to replicate that back over into my main code and see if that, improves my how fast I can get my main loop to run. So that's where I'm at on that.
I want to make several comments here. The first comment is, I can hear thumping noises outside. I got an email saying the fiber optic company is going to come to install something. So if they cut my phone cable in the process, I may go away and probably won't be back. So, and then I want to back up all the way to where you're talking about, you're showing your plot, and you showed your Dubin's path on there. And I did go watch your videos, and I had a couple thoughts watching that. The first one was, when you put up the video of actually driving around outside, you did not put your path on the screen when you on RViz when you did that. So you don't know if you're actually following your path or not. So it would be good to turn on that path so you can see where it's supposed to be going.
Okay.
And the next thing was, you were talking about, well, maybe your bushes aren't really marked correctly because you seem to be driving through them. Just go out someday and put your thing in manual mode and start recording, and just physically drive right around all the bushes and right around the house, and just then plot that back out and see what it looks like, to see if the bushes are in the right spot, or if they're not lined up or whatever. Does that make sense?
It does. originally I had done that, but and it seemed to be okay, but you know, things change. So it's worth doing that again because I was definitely, you know, cutting along this. When I in manual mode, I was cutting along this black section. So it was like it was a couple of meters off to the left or right on the, what would that have been, the x-axis.
And also, if you see in this particular picture, this must have been from your simulator. You do show that path there. But I noticed then you said, okay, I when I was driving out in the yard, we'd see it driving around. It didn't seem to be following where that path should have been at any time. So maybe something is the angles are off or whatever. So if you put that path up there and say that's where I'm supposed to be going, that would give you a better indication if you are where you're supposed to be at the current time.
Yeah, the other thing that I did in that regard is, let's see if I can find it quickly. I simplified the path. So instead of this, you know, Dubin's path, I just have basically a 3 points, you know, go up, turn left, come back. So that was the other thing I did, is in an attempt to maybe be able to capture the simulation data and then compare that to the real live data. But anyway, I'm back trying to make sure my Laura is talking quickly before I go back out and test that again.
Well, you since the stuff's on the bag file, you could just rerun your bag file again, and go into RViz and say turn the path on, so you can see if you've specified a path, just see where it's showing up in the yard. So make sure it's in the right spot and make sure it's at the right angle. And then when your vehicle's trying to follow it, see if it's trying to stay on the path or if it's going somewhere totally different. So you should already have that data created. You just have to go back and run that again.
Good point.
Because I noticed when you showed it running, on your little video was showing it, you drove from the house and you came up to where it looks like the bottom of that thing. And it seemed to be going off at a kind of a weird angle. It wasn't going straight up at that point. And then when it got up the top, then it turned off and drove off in your bushes. It could be your steering just backwards too. That might be another reason why it's doing that.
Yeah, there's so many variables going on. That's why I was trying to simplify it. And then I got into, wow, command velocity publishing might be way off. And anyway, that's what led me to, holy cow, my main loop is running slower than I wanted it to. So I wanted to get that fixed before I get back out and do actual testing.
Okay, that's the thoughts I had on that. So that's done with the current points that I had.
Thanks for that. I think I was checking my wiring to make sure I didn't have a wiring problem with my physical steering. And see if there was something that was causing my wiring to be off. So then at the moment, I'm using radio control connectors effectively sticking onto pins, and there's no locking mechanism in there. And so this is just a screen clip of an example, but I've got at least a couple of, I probably have limitless options on how to connect wires on this thing, but one thought was to, change my board and use these terminal connectors. And then this just happens to be my Citron motor controller, and this has the 3-pronged plugs. And you might not be able to see it very well, even if I zoom in like that, but there's a locking tab on the side of this. And I'm not going to change my Citron controller, but I'm like, hey, if the Citron guys used this locking tab with the 3 prongs versus a terminal connector, maybe that's not a bad way to go either. So anyway, that's on my mind of how do I make sure that my wiring is stable and robust and going to be permanent. Those seem to be two low cost options. I don't know if you guys have any experience with wiring connectors on a vibrating, moving machine. But that's the other thing that was on my mind. And I think that's other than going back to, testing this, seeing how fast I can get the Laura to talk successfully back and forth. That's where I'm at. Any comments on connectors you've used that are good?
Well, I've found that if you got, say, just stranded wire and you stick it into those little terminals, screw terminal strips like you showed, I have a hard time keeping those in there. And that's why I experiment with those crimp-on ferrules that I bought on Amazon, where you just got it's just a little round pin that you put the wire in and crimp it on. And those seem to work better in the screw terminals, but just the screw terminals themselves, they don't seem to have any way to grip onto the wire. It's just like a smooth piece of metal in there. When you screw down on it, it compresses against it, but it doesn't really seem to. It doesn't seem like they're serious about it connecting to those. So anyway, I use those little crimp-on ferrules, and those seem to work a lot better than just putting the wire in. You can also tin the wire, if it's a stranded wire, twist the end of it and then take solder and solder the wire so it's more solid. It's like putting a solid piece of wire in instead of stranded wire, if you're going to use screw terminals. So right now, do you have screw terminals on your little processor board, or that you're just pointing that out as an example there?
Yeah, just an example, because at the moment I have, they're just the radio control, what you would find in a radio control at the end of a servo. It's just 3 prongs slid onto the prong sticking up.
And another thing on that, if once you get the plugged onto the pins, that's a good connection there, but make sure you strain relief the wire so the wire's not constantly pulling on that, because it will eventually pull the thing off if you do that. So have it so you plug the thing on and then have it definitely don't leave tension on it, but then have like a little loop or something. And if you could say somehow hook that wire down so it can't, if you tug on the wire, it's not going to be pulling on the connector, it'll just be pulling against whatever's holding the thing down. So that's just another
That's a
thought.
good point. I don't have I mean, I've got some, but not up close. I mean, the wires could be moving around a bit.
As long as it's just things like 2 inches apart with just a little loop of wire between the two, that's not a big deal. But if you got longer wires, say you got a foot or two of wire on it, and you don't know, you don't have a way to control that could be a problem. So it just depends when you go to do it. Just keep in mind, is something going to try to pull it, tug on that, and try to pull it off, and if so, then try to figure out some way around that.
That's a good point.
And also the little push on connectors like that, if you're using like the RC connectors or whatever, the first time you put them on, they grip really well, but if you take them on and off a few times, they're going to slowly get less and less gripping force on your pins too. So eventually they'll wear out if you take them on and off a lot.
Sounds like a vote for screw terminals with ferrules on the end.
Well, as I say, I'm not real happy about the screw terminals themselves, but the way they build them. But I don't know what the real solution is to it. It's kind of like in your house. Do you have outlets in your house where you plug a cord into it and the cord keeps falling out? And then so every 10 years or so, you got to go through and replace your outlets because you've used them too much. That's the same concept there, that you got those connectors and they may just get to the point where they don't want to stick on there. So
We haven't gotten cut off yet, so that's good.
yeah. I don't hear any thumping going on anymore. So when we're done here, I'll run out and see if they're out there doing that. And it's just simply an email that says, "Oh, you're put on the list now," and when we're done, we'll send you an email. So it seemed odd that I heard this thumping, I was listening to it, and then all of a sudden, boom, it just popped with an email saying, "Ah, we're going to come out someday and work on that." I thought, "Oh man, they might be out there right now." You know, they're trying to run the fiber. It's a real mess. So it'll be a miracle if I get through this without losing my internet. That's all I got for this week, I guess.
I'm good.
I'm good.